and later we'll have some wine and cheese and a party. For the keynote speaker, really there's nobody literally in the world that is more appropriate, and I think is a greatest honor for us here together to welcome Natan Sharansky. Natan Sharansky was born in Ukraine. He became a spokesperson for the human rights movement in the former Soviet Union. He was a prisoner of conscience and a leader for the struggle for Soviet Jews to immigrate to Israel and to practice their culture. Natan Sharansky was a founding member of the Helsinki Group, which monitored violations of international agreements for different religions and national groups in the former Soviet Union. He worked closely with the famous Andrei Sakharov and the renowned Soviet human rights activists, and kept close contact with foreign media beyond the Iron Curtain. In 1977, a Soviet newspaper alleged that Mr. Sharansky was a collaborator with the CIA. Despite denials at every level of the U.S. government, Mr. Sharansky was found guilty and sentenced to 13 years in prison, including solitary confinement and hard labor. In the courtroom prior to the announcement of his verdict, Mr. Sharansky in a public statement stated, "To the court, I have nothing to say. To my wife and to the Jewish people, I say next year in Jerusalem." After 9 years of imprisonment due to an intense international campaign led by his wife Avital, Natan Sharansky was eventually freed on the 11th of February 1986, and immediately, after a long struggle, was able to move and migrate to Israel, and he lives in Jerusalem to this day. In Israel, he became an active person in the work to integrate Soviet Jews into Israeli society, and formed the Zionist Forum, an umbrella organization for Soviet activist groups dedicated to helping new Israelis and educating the public about the absorption issues of migration. There was a big migration of former Soviet Jews to Israel. The final chapter of this historic struggle for the release of Soviet Jews was a historic rally in which more than 250,000 people came to Washington in 1987. Many of us here remember those days, in which Natan Sharansky was the driving force. And this was during Gorbachev's first visit to the United States. In 1996, Natan Sharansky established the political party Israel B'Aliyah in order to accelerate the integration of new immigrants into Israeli society. He served in 4 successive Israeli governments as minister and deputy prime minister. In 2009, Natan Sharansky was appointed chairman of the executive of the Jewish People's Agency for Israel. The mission of the Jewish Agency is to guarantee the future of the Jewish people by strengthening the connection of every Jewish person to the state of Israel and to the Jewish people. In 2018, he received the highest Israeli award, the Israel Prize, for promoting Aliyah, migration to Israel, and for the ingathering of all the exiles of the Jewish people from around the world. Natan Sharansky received the Congressional Medal of Honor from the United States and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He's the only living non-American citizen who is the recipient of these 2 highest American awards. He's the author of many books, including Fear No Evil, The Case for Democracy, and Defending Identity. He remains a champion of human rights throughout the world, and for all people, he believes in freedom, and the advancement of human rights is critical to peace and security from around the world. And just before Mr. Sharansky can come up to the lectern, I just want to say, given all that we've been studying and discussing and debating and even arguing about for the last 12 days, when I see Mr. Sharansky here and the honor that he's here with us, it also reminds me of the days, and I know some people here were part of this struggle. I was active in the student struggle for Soviet Jewry out of Hillel at McGill University, and there was a lot of students, housewives, people coming together and struggling for human rights and the freedom of our Jewish brothers in the former Soviet Union. And I think looking back on those days and seeing Mr. Sharansky here as a leader of Israeli society, of the human rights issues from around the world today, and he's able to be with us, I think should give us the inspiration and the knowledge that if we struggle as professors, as students, to confront this growing BDS movement and the growing scourge of contemporary anti-Semitism of all places in the university, the most important institution in any democratic society, where young people are learning, where our future leaders are being created, that this has to give us, Mr. Sharansky is here, the Soviet Jewish people are free, should give us the inspiration to know that if we work hard, our struggle will also be successful. So on this note, Mr. Sharansky.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. Thank you for the great work which your institute is doing, and I follow it, and I'm involved in this work for many years already. And I understand you had 2 weeks of very intensive seminars. I was only on one lecture, and oh my God, how you can absorb all it. So I'll try not to overload you with more theories. I'll try to stick to more stories. You're speaking a lot about old and new anti-Semitism and about their connection. And of course, it takes me back 15 years ago when I had to fight to prove that there is connection. But in order to understand what is the philosophical and historical background of this growth of new and old anti-Semitism and their interconnection, I want also to take you even further back to the Soviet Union, where these things were very clear, the connection between these two things. All my theory I'll put from the beginning. I'll say only one axiom, my own, which all my books are about it. I do believe that all the people in the world, every person in the world, has 2 basic desires. Desire to be free and desire to belong. Desire to be free, meaning that, as my 4-year daughter, when she was 4 years, told me, Father, you will not tell me what to do. And I wanted to be angry, but then I thought, but isn't it what I was saying all the time to KGB and to everybody? So it's the nature of the world. Nobody will tell me what to think for sure. And also desirable not to tell me what to do. So that's instinctive desire of the person to have respect to yourself, to rely on your independent thought. But no less important is desire to belong to something bigger than your own physical life. It can be community of faith, it can be national community, it can be professional community, but the people with whom you feel very strong that they are part of your life, they are a very important part of your life, and in fact, your life has special meaning, different from your own physical survival, because of your belonging to this group. And it seems that they are almost opposite desire. One, to be part of the group, the other is to be individual. But they are deeply connected. And in order to, I discovered their connection in the Soviet Union. I was really very lucky, because in the Soviet Union it was like ideal experiment. I was deprived of both. I had no identity and no freedom. And they discovered them both, and I discovered connection between them. So what I mean that I was deprived of both? Yeah, I was born in 1948 in the city of Donetsk, then it was called Stalino. Today everybody knows this name because it is the center of the war between Russia and Ukraine. In those days nobody could ever imagine that there can be a war between Russia and Ukraine. If then in my childhood somebody will say to me, guess the next war here will be or between Russia and Ukraine or between the inhabitants of Earth and the inhabitants of Venice. I would say, of course, between the Earth and Venice, because it was simply impossible to imagine that this great unity of Russian and Ukrainian people forever could change. But what is important, I lived in absolutely without anything Jewish in my life. There was a lot of Jews in Donetsk, but we had no language and no place where you can learn it. We had no religion and no place where you can learn about it. We had no tradition. The words like Purim or Hanukkah did not exist in our lives. The words Bar Mitzvah, Brit Milah didn't exist. The words didn't exist in our lives. So there was nothing Jewish. But there was one Jewish thing. It was anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism was in abundance. Anti-Semitism in the streets, prejudices, and what is more important, not official, but in fact very official state anti-Semitism. All the discussions at home that because you're Jewish, you cannot have this career, you cannot go to this university, and so on and so on. So that's what I mean, the life without identity. And it was also the life without freedom, because from the very early age, you learn that you should not speak about this, and you should not do this, and you should agree whenever you asked to do this. And there are books which you will never read. There are books which you will not even mention that you know about their existence, and so on. And I remember, I know exactly the day when I started the life of loyal Soviet citizen. I was 5 years old, Stalin died, and my father explains to me, who is 5 years, and to my brother, who's 7 years, and my father makes sure that the neighbors don't hear. We lived in so-called communal apartments, 3, 4, 5 families in one apartment. And he explains us that it is very good that Stalin died, because he said we Jews were in big danger, and you should remember all your life that just when we were in danger, a miracle happened and Stalin died. He doesn't tell us, maybe he doesn't know, but he doesn't tell us that it is Purim, and it was the time of so-called doctor's plot, when Jewish doctors were accused to poison Soviet leaders. And there was prepared a big trial, and people were under the torture, leading doctors of Soviet Union, and the trial had to be on Pesach. That was a good time for inviting anti-Semitic feelings. And he died on Purim. So it's a great metaphor, which we couldn't even appreciate, and I don't know if my father knew about it. But, he says, remember all your life that miracle happened, but of course don't say it to anybody, and do what everybody does. And next day I go to the kindergarten, and I sing together with all the children how happy we are that we were born under Stalin, and that thank you to Stalin for our happy childhood. And I'm crying with all the children about his death, and I have no idea who is crying really and who is crying like me. There is no way to know. That is typical life of Soviet double-thinker. You live all your life and you do things which you have to do. You vote. There is only one candidate. You read the books which you're supposed to read. You make statements which you're supposed to, and you know that all this is lie. And you also don't know, well, you believe that most of the people like you know that all this lie, and they're pretending, but you really don't know who's who. And that's typical life of Soviet citizen, without Soviet double-thinker, without freedom. So maybe you should fight against it. It's so as my daughter said, you will not tell me what to do. So why we permit them to say what we'll do? We have to fight against it. You will not fight, you will not take any risk against the regime which already killed tens of millions of its citizens if you have no values to fight for. If the only value in your life is physical survival and success, and you learn it from your parents that you are Jew, that's why in order to succeed you must be number one in your class, in physics, in mathematics, in chess, in music, it doesn't matter in what, but you must be the best because that is the way of survival in the Soviet system. So everything is about survival. To be Jewish, it doesn't mean anything good, anything positive. It's simply like a disease. You have such a disease. You're born with this disease. You have to learn how to live with this disease. And the medicine is your professional success. So that's life without freedom and identity. And then, in 1967, when Israel entered our life without us doing anything. Simply Soviet Union was already preparing celebration about the victory of the progressive Arab nations over American agent Israel, and then such a humiliation, in spite of all the weapons, all the money, all the officers which Soviet Union sent to Egypt and Syria, Israel emerged victorious. And I cannot tell, of course, we were, as every double thinker in the Soviet Union, was happy that Soviet Union was defeated. But to say that it is important for us, more important than our career, than our, of course not. Our life is about our survival. But then somehow you see that people around you, those who love you and those who hate you, all of them, look on you and say, how you guys did it. They don't ask, maybe you know by chance how Israelis did it. They ask, how you did it. So they connect you to Israel. You know, as many times it happens with us with Jews. When we see that non-Jews are saying us something, we start taking it seriously. So when all these non-Jews are telling me, it's your Israel, how they did it, you start thinking, why they think it's my Israel? That's when I and many in my generation started reading in the underground the books about Israel, books which were about the Jews, the books which were brought by tourists. And suddenly you realize that there is unbelievably interesting, exciting history. History doesn't start from October Revolution, from 1917, with all this miserable life in the Soviet Union, with all these repressions and so on. But it starts from Exodus from Egypt, thousands of years ago. And then you go through all these centuries and you understand that if you only will make some switch in your mind, it can be also your history. And it will be so much more interesting. And you find out that there are such a thing called Jewish people. Here are coming all these tourists. They say, oh, your father is from Odessa, and my father is from Odessa. We have family, we want to help you. You find out that all of them, from Sydney and from Miami and from London and from Paris, they're all from Odessa. And they're all family. And they all want to help. And you find out that there is this state which is ready to send airplanes to the end of the world, but to help you. And all this together, and when you're thinking and you're understanding that people of your age already are making are involved in such a unique history, and the life is so interesting, so you want that it will be also your life. And that, of course, it took 1 and 2 or 3 years, but with the time, you feel more and more that life is much more bigger than your career. And later, because Andrei Sakharov played a very important role in my life. I would say he was my rabbi, but he was not Jewish, so he could not be my rabbi, but he was my teacher. And he reached already the highest level of the science, and I'm only in the beginning. And he proves by his writings that even at the highest level you will not become free if you will not start speaking freely your mind. And here you have it. You have the people and the history that you can be part of it. And that's what gives you strength to say, to stop the life of double thinker, to say for the first time publicly something that is not approved by authorities. I don't want to live here. I want to leave this country. I want to go to Israel. Of course, it changes all your life, and there are persecutions and confiscations and searches, and some of your friends will ask that their names will be taken from your telephone book in order not to be interrogated by KGB. But suddenly you feel such a great relief. You are not lying anymore. You are saying what you really want to say. They will not tell me what to say. And that's how you start the life of a free person. And the moment you start the life of a free person, you have strength to speak about your rights, about rights of other Jews, about rights of non-Jews. And that's how very quickly I became spokesman of two movements, Jewish movement and human rights movement. And by the way, there were many people who were telling me that I have to choose whether I'm Jewish nationalist or I am dissident fighter for human rights for everybody. And there were some people on both sides, by the way, who were insisting that I'll choose. Because if you are not choosing, it's not real. They thought it's all nonsense. I don't have to choose, because if I have strength to fight for the freedom of myself and the other people, it's only because I belong to something which is bigger than my physical life. I have my identity. So for me, it became so clear that these two things, identity and freedom, are connected. You want to have meaningful life as a free person. And you want also the others to have meaningful life in their identities as free persons. And that's what is meant in pursuit of happiness. Now, go straight now to days after prison. Those who want to know more about prison can read my book, Fear No Evil. And I'm now in the free world. And I'm in Israel. And of course, we have many challenges and so on. But it's clear to me that the defeat of Soviet Union showed so clearly to everybody that these two things, desire to be free and desire to belong, have to go together. And in fact, my partners in the struggle of Soviet Union, then in prison, were Ukrainian nationalists and Lithuanian Catholics and Crimea Tatars, Muslims who were persecuted. And we felt very comfortable and very good with the fact that we are returning back to our identity, and that gives us strength to fight for our freedom. With the time, being in the government, you find out that in fact the free world, at least at that moment European free world, decided that identity is a burden, that identity is something which makes it's more difficult to have a full life in peace. You remember this song or Imagine of John Lennon, who speaks about imagine the world without governments, without God, without religion, the world where there is nothing to die for. And that became like the hymnon, the idea of New Europe. We don't want to have anything to die for. How many centuries we had these awful religious wars, and after this national wars? Enough. And that in fact was the heart of postmodernism. On one hand, there were some very good things in all this world where human rights are becoming the law of this world. But the condition in order we all will enjoy life in peace is that we will skip our identities. We must have the world without nations and without religion. And in this world, Israel, which is Jewish national democratic state, by definition. In 1948, when it was proudly declared that we are a Jewish democratic state, the world applauded. But since then, the idea of national state became less and less popular. And if this national state, because it insists to be Jewish state, also causes problems, you see all these wars in the Middle East, and I was told again and again, I'm coming to my French liberal Jewish activists, and I'm asking them, don't you have a problem with this new anti-Semitism? They say, what new anti-Semitism? It's all the result of the fact that you insist to have a Jewish state. We don't need French state, we want to be part of Europe. And you insist to have a Jewish state, and that's why you have these wars, and these wars are coming to us with Muslim terrorism. Who needs? The idea of national state became non-popular. It's something which was like natural base of free world in the beginning of 20th century. In the middle of 20th century, the idea of national democratic state became less and less popular. And especially when it brings us wars. Who needs these wars? That was the idea. And here, and this very naive and one can say romantic idea of having free democratic world without identities, but in fact means world which, if there is nothing to die for, you cannot defend your freedom and democracy. But this happened to be a great present to those who really hate us and who are real anti-Semites and anti-Israel and so on, and those who are fighting against us. And just in the beginning of this century, when they started the so-called Second Intifada, and I'm in the government, these very difficult times, and we have suicide bombings practically on every corner of Jerusalem. You remember there were months when 50, 61 months, 130 people were killed by suicide bombers in the center of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And we have to fight it, and we have to plan, and at the end we have to decide to send army to Jenin and to Bethlehem, to the heart of the terrorist activity. And it is natural that our enemies are using all types of anti-Semitic materials against us. And suddenly you see that our friends, our colleagues, our believers in freedom from free world, from Europe, but then it came step by step to some universities in America, they are saying, in fact, the same things. And that's when I started speaking about anti-Semitism of some newspapers and some politicians towards Israel. And I have to say, those days, to accuse somebody who is criticizing Israel in anti-Semitism was like to make a major insult to Western politicians. They were saying, it cannot be, criticism of Israel cannot be anti-Semitism. It is, you can agree with the criticism, you will not agree with the criticism, but we are all against anti-Semitism. Holocaust proved anti-Semitism is the awful crime against humanity, but we are against Israeli politics. And then that's when I came, after a lot of thinking, with the formula 3D, which I understand was used in this seminar many times. The idea was that we have to look. First of all, I do agree that there should be free criticism or political disagreement with any country, and definitely also with Israel. We in Israel, a politician who disagrees with its own government, that agrees with everything with his government, has no future as a politician in Israel. So we are full of criticism, and we deserve to be criticized and to be critical to ourselves. But when it becomes an anti-Semitism, that was an important question for me to decide and to explain. And I said, look, what were the main tools of anti-Semites for thousands of years? It was demonization, double standard, and delegitimization. Demonization, well, even before Christianity and during the first centuries of Christianity, Jews were spoilers of the wealth, and then, of course, using the blood of the babies for matzah. And as Camus later said, for the anti-Semite, Jew is the closest to Satan. I got to say, by the way, it was very deep, this feeling, the Jew is something close to Satan, almost all our days. I can say, in Soviet Union, you could see it easily. A friend of mine, who was my very good friend in the camp, Christian activist, he once asked me, well, do you have maybe in your historical archives, how felt people who were trying the blood of the babies? I said, well, what are you talking about? Well, he said, no, everybody understands that you and the modern Jews are not doing it, but 500 years ago, 600, you had it. He really believed that. He said, I know in Siberia, well, in the time of the war, there were many families who had to be evacuated to Siberia, and some of them went to the God-forsaken places where there were people, and I know the case when one family welcomed those who came, shared with them their house, and when they heard that they are Jews, they almost fell. They couldn't believe, because they said, but they started looking if they have a tail. Because, well, these peasants, they never saw Jews, but they did believe somewhere that it's kind of messengers of Satan. So, of course, for the majority of the modern world, it's not like, but it was centuries and centuries and centuries of demonization of Jews. So I say, of course, today it's not the same. But here is the cartoon in the independence, in the time of Second Intifada. Ariel Sharon is eating babies, Palestinian babies, and the blood is dropping from his mouth, big. And he says, well, look at me, you never saw a politician who is kissing babies? And I, as a minister fighting against anti-Semitism, appealed to the newspaper. I said, it's an anti-Semitic cartoon. They said, not only it's not anti-Semitic, they put it on it was declared the best cartoon of the year for the newspaper. Then it got the award, special award of British journalism as the best cartoon of the year in Britain. And it was done in solidarity with the Palestinians who are suffering. At that very time, just simply by chance I was here at the lecture when about Hezbollah, and it was mentioned that Al-Manar, the TV of Hezbollah, broadcasted the film where it is shown big how a rabbi takes a Christian baby, cuts his throat, and the blood goes all over, and then they are making matzah from this. And then in those days, I took that film, I showed it to, first of all, to our government. Everybody was shocked. They couldn't imagine that that's what millions of Muslims at this moment see. And then I made sure that the leader of the French Jewish community showed it to French president. And I then told them, you understand that it's all broadcasted through French satellite to Europe. And so all your citizens who watch Arabic TV see it. So it took to the government of France 2 years through the court to prohibit broadcasting by French TV of Al-Manar, of Hezbollah's TV. But it's interesting, it was happening at the same time. Here, everybody agrees. Everybody in the free world agrees that it's absolutely unacceptable what Al-Manar does. At the same time, the cartoon which shows Israeli leader eating Palestinian babies and blood dropping from his body, is getting the best cartoon of it. And I'm saying that's demonization. They want or not, that is new anti-Semitism. That's the same tool which we use. In those days, one Nobel Prize winner in literature from Spain is coming to Israel and makes very strong statement of solidarity with Palestinians. It's his right. He ignores what's happening with the suicide bombers. He's speaking about the plight of Palestinians in Jenin when the Israeli army went there. I disagree with him, but it's absolutely his right. But he says, I was in Palestinian refugee camp. That's Auschwitz of today. I have to say, I was many times at Palestinian camps. And I think it is the right thing to discuss why the fifth generation of Palestinians live in refugee camps. And we can debate who has to be blamed, Palestinian leadership, Israel, or both. It's debatable. But to say that it has something reminding Auschwitz, those who were not in Auschwitz could go and see. I was there, well, my daughters were there. It's very important, in spite of the fact that we know all this, it's important to see once in a while. And so that is demonization, because that is no less absurd than all the other accusations against Jews. Again, though it was a little bit later, Israel, there was an earthquake in Haiti, and Israel was the first to come there. Because we are trained for this type of things, and we are the first who come to Turkey, to Haiti, to Ceylon, and so on, and trying to help. And I happened to be in America, and I was pleasantly surprised. On CNN was a big program. They were so upset with America. They said, how it is that Israel is so far from Haiti, and we are so close to Haiti. And Israel was the first who came, and look what a wonderful work they are doing. So it was great, really. I was very proud Israeli. Then there is one email, whatever, a blog from, I don't even remember, it's from some Muslim country like Indonesia. Somebody wrote that you know why Israeli soldiers came there? They harvesting the organs of Haitians in order to sell them or to use them for their own injured people. So, no, okay, somebody wrote such a nonsense. And then there is requests in Germany, in British Parliament, there are requests and demands of investigation and demand that the United Nations will interfere and check it. That is blood libel of today. And it comes from nowhere. It's as justified as the book about the elders of Zion. So you know, the Russian secret police created such a book without any proof. Here also. But the way how the world reacts on it, the way with the free world, that it starts seriously discussing all this, that is the demonization. So then we go to delegitimization. It's clear. At some moment, the earlier years, I think, 5th year of 5th century Christianity, when it became official religion, it was decided that Judaism is not official. Now we have a New Testament, we don't need the Old Testament. Well, then it was corrected. But for some time, it was not recognized religion. Later, when it became a national question, Stalin wrote a big article that Jews are not a religion, not a nation. Again, we had 150 nations in Soviet Union. Jews were not a nation. Well, it meant that we don't need to open such Jewish schools and so on and so on. Now we are in the new stage, a stage of legitimacy of this Jewish state. The only state with legitimacy is discussed again and again and again on many different forums. It's the state of Israel. And I say that's the same approach. And the most interesting is double standard. Because double standard, it was almost official weapon of anti-Semitism. In Russia, I had a book at home, almost 1,000 laws which say that So these people are paying such a tax, and Jewish merchant pays 2%. Or that here can live everybody, but Jews cannot live here. And so almost 1,000 laws where there is made different standard for Jews. Well, of course, in Nazi Germany it was also official. In Soviet Union it was not official, but everybody knew that Jew cannot go to this university, can go to this, and so on. So there was different standard. If today, officially, the Human Rights Committee of United Nations condemns Israel for violation of human rights more times than all the dictators in the world together, you must have a very special standard for this. Because, well, you look at the map of the Freedom House, which makes every year the estimation of the level of democracy. By far the most black place in the world is Middle East. And there is this black, there is a very tiny, tiny white spot, because that's their colors, and that's Israel. And so, and that's all about human rights. Well, Freedom House, it's about human rights, but also about economical rights. And so, and if United Nations, not Human Rights Committee of United Nations, condemns this white spot more than all this black color together, it must be different standard. So I asked, once I was in Geneva, and I asked the commissioner, then it was very respectable woman judge from Canada, Arbel, yeah. Very respectable woman and good intellectual, was very interested in discussing. And I asked her, how you live with this? That your committee, that your chairman, and in official agenda of the committee, there is, every year you make agenda anew. There is one point which you cannot change, it has to be there, is condemnation of Israel. The only country in the world, from 150 countries, there is one permanent agenda. So I said, how are you going to live? She said, of course it's wrong, I agree, but it doesn't depend on me. What to do, it's the countries discuss between themselves. And there is agreement, Russia and African countries, that Chechnya will not be discussed and Darfur will not be discussed. There is agreement between China and all those countries that Tibet will not be discussed. And as a result, situation in Saudi Arabia and some others will not be discussed. And the only country about which they didn't make such an agreement is Israel. Said, no, it's a very good logical explanation. But what it means that the only country that there is no such agreement, not discussed? It means that there is different standard. So there is one country with different standard. That is anti-Semitism. And that was my idea of the 3Ds. Well, I have to say that though the idea of 3Ds remained, and we'll speak in a moment how it developed, but why I chose 3D, unfortunately it's forgotten, because what I was saying, that if you come to 3D film, if you're in 3D film, you know what it's 3D, and you want to see, you are given 3D spectacles. If you will not put the 3D spectacles, you don't understand what's happening. You put them and you immediately understand what you see in front. I said, put this principle 3D. You say it's legitimate criticism of Israel. No, I don't care, legitimate, not legitimate, because every criticism has to be discussed. But look, if there is demonization, if there is legitimization, or there is clear double standard which is not applied to any other country in the world, then it's anti-Semitism. And I have to say, then we started, there were Jewish organizations, ADL and Hillel, and Stand With Us, accepted it and started using the work. For politicians, Western politicians, especially European politicians, to agree that there can be any connection between the world of anti-Semitism that we all hate, we are against, and so on, and criticism of Israel, they were not ready to accept it. And then I found one ally. And this was unexpected. Joschka Fischer. Joschka Fischer was the foreign minister of Germany in those years. By his origin, he was anarchist, almost terrorist. You remember this gang of Bader and Meinhof? It was his friends. He started together with them. Well, he stopped. That's why he was not arrested, but he was interrogated. And at some moment he understood that it goes too far. He said to me later that it was at the moment of Entebbe when his compatriots, members of this group, together with the Arab terrorists, hijacked the airplane and made selection of Jews. And then he became the activist, Green activist, and the head of Green Party. And at some moment, Green Party became part of the Social Democratic Coalition, and he became foreign minister. And he tells that, well, of course, he was very much to the left from my views, and so on, but at some moment, he was in Israel, he was jogging in the morning in Tel Aviv, and he passed near Delphinarium. And a few hours after this, in this Delphinarium came school children, where they graduated from school all the night. It's like bar for youth. And there was suicide bomber, and 22 of them were killed. And it was an awful tragedy, and I spent a lot of time with the families of this. But it was interesting that, and he said, the German leader, has to do everything that this type, that there will be no support and no sympathy in our world to this new anti-Semitism. And when I came with my 3Ds, and I have to say, politicians in Europe were not ready to agree that any type of criticism of Israel can be called anti-Semitism. But this Committee on Security and Cooperation in Europe, in fact, Helsinki conference, which was continuation of what we started many years ago, it finally had its meetings on anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism then meant only one thing: denial of Holocaust. In fact, on the base of fighting against denial of Holocaust, started meeting these conferences. And he said, I wrote the second conference in Berlin. And in Berlin, he gave me an opportunity to speak and to present all my theory of 3Ds in details with all the last examples, and here that, yes, Europe also is involved in the new anti-Semitism. And then he said that it has to be put in the declaration. And I have to say that there was big debate. In the end, I want simply to read you. No, I thought I left it here. Okay, that was. I'll quote from my memory. In the end, they agreed to put there that many delegations expressed the opinion that some forms of criticism of Israel can become anti-Semitic. At the same time, it must be clear that criticism of policy of any country is not anti-Semitic by itself. So you can see how weak it is, how afraid they say it. Nevertheless, for the first time it was said that some criticism of Israel also can become anti-Semitic. So then I went to America. There it's already easier field. There was hearing in the American Senate, Congress, Congressman Lantos and Congressman Smith passed the resolution that, in fact, of 3Ds. Today, if you know, there is official definition of anti-Semitism by the Commission on Remembering the Holocaust, which became like official European definition, which gives examples when criticism of Israel can be anti-Semitic. In fact, they give example on demonization and double standard and delegitimization. So we can say now it's already part of accepted thing that some criticism of Israel or some forms of criticism of Israel are in fact anti-Semitism. It's still each time there is a battle, there is struggle, but and there are some attempts in the American Congress to pass a resolution that you cannot use double standard because that's restriction of the freedom of speech. So, but what's important to remember? We needed these definitions not only to say guys, you are anti-Semites. No. We need also to say that there is a lot of room for criticism. We don't want that it will be stopping any criticism. Everything, if somebody comes and says, I really think that Israel has to be blamed for keeping 5 generations of Palestinians in refugee camps. I disagree. I can prove that it is not our blame. But that's political disagreement. Nobody should stop it. And we always should remember that after all, the initial ideas of postmodernism, there is a lot of noble things there. And we have to give as much room to freedom of speech as possible. Now, but it must be clear that today we have, and on every American campus, it's growing battle. Practically every week there is another attempt to pass a resolution that Israel is an apartheid state, and another attempt to demonize Israeli leaders, and of course the double standard which is applied in the discussions towards Israeli army is never applied to American army or to British army or to any other army. So at least we have a tool to fight. Now, as a result of the fact that this postmodern denial of identities went very far, there is counter-reaction. And there is now new nationalism which is coming on this stage. If 20 years ago there was only one right-wing nationalist party in Europe, it was Le Pen's party, which was saying that we want our national pride back. And of course they went to the extreme and they were anti-liberal in many things. Today there are at least 15 parties in Europe. And some of them are very influential. And some of them are in power, sharing the power. In Hungary and Austria. Again, they start from absolutely justified thing. If there is one extreme which is denying identity for the sake of freedom, then there is reaction, which is denying liberty for the sake of nationalism. And we should not go to one extreme, we should not go to the other extreme. We should look for the way how liberalism and nationalism can go together. But what's interesting, these postmodern extremists, I would say, they were insisting that they love Jews, but they hate Israel. These many nationalist parties insist that they love Israel, but they hate their liberal Jewish community in their country. And it's clear exactly why postmodernists are against Israel, because it is a national state. It's a national democratic state. These national parties, and it's including all those who are Brexit, and those who are like Spencer and others supporting Trump, they put Israel as an example of national state which stood against the attacks of postmodernism. And then Spencer, which is of course he's white racist, he said on one of the debates with some rabbi in America, he said, but you Zionists, you are white, how you say, white, well, you're ours, because you're against mixture with anybody else. That's what we want to learn from you. You want to be white state of Jews in Middle East. We want to be white nation America. The thing that he said it, okay, he said. The fact that Rabbi was confused, he didn't know what to say, that was really appalling. It shows how difficult it is in today's world simply to be at the same time liberal and nationalist. That was, for me, it was very upsetting. But here in this new situation, we, as the Israeli government also, have a new problem. Imagine the government of Hungary or the government of Austria extremely friendly to Israel. They are ready in Europe, which is becoming so anti-Israel, they are ready to fight for our interests. And they have huge problems with the liberal Jewish community in their own country. And I was involved as the head of Jewish Agency a year ago in a number of discussions in the government. What should be our policy? And there were some ministers who were saying that, look, after all, they have their political debate between conservatives and liberals. It's not our business. Well, we cannot now be involved. People of this country elected this government. They have disagreement with their political opponents. It's not our business. They are good for us. We as a state have to continue to develop the good relations. And I was reminding them, look, there are so-called liberal forces in America, like Linda Sarsour, big feminist, yeah, who said that real feminists cannot be Zionists. And with all these extremes. And we expect from American liberal Jews to stand strong, not to be deceived by this. And you see that in spite of the fact that she is leader of big feminist march, not too much with her. Because she, at the same time, she's clearly anti-Semite, hatred towards Israel, and her hatred towards Israel is new anti-Semitism. And we expect from them not to play in her hands. I think they have the right to say that we expect from you not to play in the hands of those who hate us, but express solidarity with Israel. And I have to say that Israel is looking for the right position. When the Hungarian government started campaigning against Soros, and I have to say, Soros is not our friend of a Jewish state. But when this campaign turned into the campaign against his nose, and when it was said that these Soroses are controlling finances of Europe, so it's clearly anti-Semitic. And it took some time, and to our Prime Minister, to say it to Hungarian Prime Minister. Orban, yeah. And I have to say, I wasn't at that meeting, but I later met the president of Hungary. And he told me, well, look, we have such a great respect to Israel. And when Prime Minister of Israel says this, we are taking it seriously. So, but it was not simple. And the fact that, let's say, when President Trump responded in a very strange way on the demonstrators who were saying, Jews will not replace us. And President Trump said, well, there are, both sides are, there are good people on both sides. Well, later he tried to explain what he really meant. Doesn't matter. Israel government had to react immediately, and for 48 hours it didn't react. I called to our spokesman, our Prime Minister, and said, don't you understand that that's a big problem? The fact that Trump is doing good things for us here is such a clear... He said, wait another 24 hours. And then Prime Minister said something rather weak, but said, I have to say it's really very difficult for the state when there is some leader who is doing some very good things for it, and at the same time does something which can be seen as a sympathy to anti-Semitism, it has to react immediately. And the same we are expecting for liberal Jews. And here I'm coming to the last point because I really want to spend more time in the discussion. In this struggle against anti-Semitism on the left and anti-Semitism on the right, it's very important that left will fight anti-Semitism on the left, and the right will fight anti-Semitism on the right. Because what's happening is absolute opposite. The moment another liberal will say something awful about Israel, like I gave an example with Linda Sarsour, some Jewish women's organizations reacted. Some said, well, of course we don't agree with her, but she is doing too important work for the women in order we will not be part of it. And it was difficult for them. On the other hand, immediately, we in Israel and Zionist Organization of America and so on attacked her. But how it helps? Well, to whom it helps? She can be only happy if right-wingers or nationalists are attacking her. Liberals have to attack anti-Semitism on the left. On the other hand, as I gave example with Orban, when there is always some statements coming from American administration, if there is any demonstration of anti-Semitism on the right have to react. The fact that all the liberals immediately attacked Trump, they'll attack Trump in any way. Whatever he will say, they'll attack him. So it's only adds him support of his camp. Who cares? But it is very important that people of his camp, his allies, will be responding. Because after all, the struggle, it's very interesting that we as Jews and we, the state of Israel, stand against two streams at the same time. On one hand, there is liberalism, which is against identity, and which says, well, why you are a Jewish state? On the other hand, there is nationalism against liberalism, which says, why do you need all these liberal Jewish communities? And we're standing against both of them, against new anti-Semitism and old anti-Semitism. In fact, we are helping to the world to have the best of both. From what I started, that identity and freedom have to go together. We have to take the best from liberalism and the best from nationalism and to bring them together. And that's exactly what our struggle against left and right anti-Semitism is doing. Thank you. I finished my speech. And now we have a lot of time for questions or answers or statements or whatever. Please. Because if you don't, then we'll have ourselves. Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your very wise. Hi. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharansky, for being here and for your very wise words and insights to the world. I just wanted to know, were you really shocked by the rise in the recent anti-Semitism, or does this not shock you as much as perhaps the rest of us?
No, I was shocked. Well, not now, but 20 years ago, when we finished so successfully our struggle against Soviet Union, and it seems that it was proved in such a powerful way. What are the real values for which the free world is fighting and should fight? And well, when I came to Israel from the very first day, I said, look, I want Palestinians to have all the rights that I have, except I don't want them to be able to destroy us. So it seemed to me that it would be so simple to come to, maybe not with the Palestinians, but to come to understanding with the free world about what should be the direction of our efforts. And then when you are sitting in the government, so you know firsthand what really are decisions and what are considerations and how deeply we are concerned about all the aspects of human rights and situation with occupation. And then to hear from your liberal friends, well, I was absolutely shocked. I came to France with people who were actively involved in the struggle, Soviet Jewry, not for Soviet Jewry, but against Soviet Union and so on. And I'm discussing them situation in the Middle East in terms of civil society, how we can strengthen civil society in Palestine. They said to me, come on, Zionism is a failed doctrine, because you try, well, in the 48, everybody was sympathetic because Jews suffered and so on. But today it's clear, East is East, West and West. You brought your European identity there. You try to impose it on them. Who needs Jewish stay there? You'll see how Europe is not anti-Semitic when this Zionist idea will fall apart. You all will have to go back to Europe, and you'll see what big efforts we will do that you will become our citizens. And you know why? Because we need you Jews for the real struggle which we must have. And the real struggle is between us, Europe, and America. That is a big cultural struggle, whether we will need all this nationalism of America or they will take liberalism of Europe. I thought I came to madhouse, simply madhouse, really. And these are people who were like our partners on Helsinki process. They were those who were responding that dissidents in Soviet Union need our support and so on. So yeah, I was, and then of course this new anti-Semitism, again, because you see it from both sides. I was in the government when we made a decision about Operation Defensive Shield. It's when 130 citizens are killed from suicide bombers, 20 of them during Seder night. So we have no choice. We send our army. And that meeting, which took us 12 hours meeting night, it was decided that when we'll send our troops, we will not use our tanks and airplanes, which could make all this operation in a few hours. We will go from house to house in the heart of this terror. We'll go from house to house. As a result, in Jenin, 56 Palestinians were killed and 23 of our soldiers, which is, our soldiers were killed because we decided not to use any weapons which can kill maybe a few hundred people, maybe a few thousand people. And so I feel that we did what we had to do. And that was the heart of all these terrorists who were coming for the last months. I come to America, and there is Jenin, it becomes like a big story on the campuses. And there is stories how Israel put alive under the earth thousands of Palestinians. And not only that there are students who believe in all this. There is official statistic which Israel published, and a few weeks after this it became clear that what we said is true and that is not true. But one Jewish student tells me on one of the New York University in Canada, you know, for me as liberal Jew, it will be better if Israel doesn't exist, because then I am not responsible. That's when we started our program of our shlichim sending on the campuses, because then I came back to Israel, and I said to our Rishon, after I visited also Harvard and San Francisco State University, which was the worst, and many others. And I told him, I believe the most important battlefield for the future of Jewish people is in American campuses. Because they are so vulnerable, the young Jews, to this unbelievable, simply new anti-Semitism, this demonization of Israel, and they feel that or they have to be part of this, and they don't want, or they have to distance themselves from anything connected to Israel, and that's a big danger. So yeah, I was shocked, I was surprised, and that's, we started working, still a lot of work has to be done. Yeah. Yes, please.
Hi, Mr. Sharansky. I just wanted to say I've been a long-time supporter and fan of yours from South Africa, and just wanted to say it's a great honor to listen to it tonight. And I wanted to ask you, do you think, in light of the anti-Semitism in Europe today, do you think the solution is like what they're suggesting in Berlin, like don't wear your yarmulke, or like, do you think it's more like this encouraging Aliyah to Israel? I mean, what do you see the future of, you know, Jews in Europe? And also, the second question is, how do you deal with, I mean, the UN is so structurally against Israel, like as you've discussed. Like, do you think we able to fight the system from the inside, or do you think it's something that needs to be sort of reformed?
About United Nations, you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so first question is about Jews in Europe. First of all, I think it is a very sad situation already for many years, not from today, from already for 15 years. Rabbis and heads of the schools in Paris tell to children that when they leave the school, Jewish school, to take over their yarmulke. It's unbelievable. In Paris and in Moscow, you don't need. You can go freely. In Kiev, you can go freely. In Paris, you can for 15 years already. So it's really also. I said that in my childhood, I couldn't imagine that there will be war between Russia and Ukraine. In my distant years, I couldn't imagine that in Europe, at some moment, there will be a situation that the teacher will say to children, don't go with yarmulke, with kippah. Now, as to what is the future, I think it's, we as Israel have always to be ready for those who want to come. And just when I was the head of Jewish Agency, started big increase in Aliyah in France. And I think we as a government didn't do enough to help to those who are coming. We could have even more. I think the real concern has to be for the French government. The fact that 50% of French Jewish communities, 600,000 people, 50% of them say that they came to the conclusion that the future of their children should not be in France. That's big question mark about what is really happening in France. I know that Finkelkraut, there is such a philosopher. I once was at his home because I really liked some of the things that he was writing. And I came to him, they asked him what I was asking for many years, practically everybody in Europe. Do you think there is future for Jews in France? And he told me, you know what, it's difficult for me to answer this question because I am not really part of Jewish community. I am Solidarity, I'm Jewish, but I don't live the life of Jewish community. I don't know. But my concern is much bigger than you. Is there a future for France in France? And then I told him, you know what I can tell you? There is always future for France in Israel. Because you understand what he meant. If you read his works, you understand. He is big believer in French national identity. He is big liberal and he is believer in French. And he is afraid that France is giving up its French national identity. So I said to him that in Israel we are keeping identity and freedom together. So, yeah. Okay. And the second question, look, unfortunately, it is built in United Nations because from the beginning it's not the organization of democratic countries. And each time, once I even said to one American president, why shouldn't you launch the United Democratic Nations? And only those nations who are, or those leaders who are elected by their people in free elections can send their representative to this organization. He said the problem is that only America and Israel will be the members. Why? Because or they are dictators, or they are democracies who are afraid to insult dictators. And that's why they will never agree to something like this. As long as it is an organization where the people who are voting there are not sent by their people, but they represent some dictatorial interests of this moment, I'm not a big optimist. That's why I think there are questions in which it should have its advice and consent, but to let to the organization where majority is dictators to make real serious decisions about the future of democratic world, of course, I don't believe in it. Yeah, please. Yeah, I'm sorry, here I don't see, I almost guess who's raising hands, and that's why.
Good evening. I want to take you back when you were first freed and you were getting pressure from the universal human rights activists that you should take their side and the more particular Jewish activists on the other. It seems to me that parallels a deep split among world Jews now, with most American Jews taking the universal human rights side and opposing the current president of the United States, and many Israelis taking the sort of Jewish human rights side and offering support. So my question for you is, what advice can you give to unite the world Jewish community?
Yeah. First of all, if to go back to those days that, as you say, I was under the pressure, it was very different. It was not after I was released. It was at the time when I was spokesman of two movements, when I was Zionist in Soviet Union and I was Democrat in Soviet Union. There were some Democrats who were telling me the real Democrat cannot be nationalist. If you're believing like we in universal human rights, why you're Jewish nationalist? And there were some people in Israel who were telling me that it is dangerous for our movement. If we want to help the Jews out of the Soviet Union, we should not be involved in the internal struggle in the Soviet Union. So it was a little bit different. I declined both of the complaints, as I explained. Now, today, it's, whether we want or not, objectively, Jewish people are split. Half of Jewish people lives in Israel and half lives in the diaspora. And they have, let's say, they all want to survive as Jewish state or as Jewish community and to continue our march in history as Jewish people. At least most of us want it, yeah? We have different survival strategies, by definition. So, strategy how to survive Jewish democratic state in the Middle East is one thing, and for this we need a strong army, and we have to know how to defend ourselves, and we should not go into the illusion of making peace when there is no partner, and so on. And let's say for American Jewish community, in order to survive in liberal state and not to be assimilated, they have to think how, first of all, how to keep this society liberal in order there will be no persecution against minorities. And second, how to deal with the question of assimilation. So with all our desire to be together, we have different priorities. But I can tell you, look, in Bible you have David, who was a great musician, but he had to fight. And you have Isaiah, a prophet, who was dreaming about peace in the world. And to say, so one is good and one is bad, you cannot. That's the world. We have to find the way how we fighting our Davidian struggle in the Middle East, and we living as a minority in liberal society, which has to all the time to think how to make sure that society will continue to be liberal and we will continue to be Jewish minority there, how we can continue together our path. So debate is inevitable. But what I'm saying, if we turn this not simply in mutual accusation, why you are not like us, they will not be like us and we will not be like them because we had a different situation. But how we can understand one another better and where we can make some kind of concessions towards one another, then I think it will be big favor to Jewish people, but it also will be big favor to the world, because the world needs these Davidians and the Zion instincts together. Yeah, well, see, there's a kind of somewhere. Yeah. So please.
Thank you so much. You mentioned on the beginning of your speech Ukrainian-Russian conflict, and my question is about this. From the beginning of Ukrainian-Russian war, a small Jewish voluntary military group was formed, Matilan, with own mobile synagogue and a rabbi. And this group provoked a huge resonance in Ukrainian press. For Ukrainian society, it was somehow very important to ascertain to be sure that Jews are on Ukrainian side. So my question is, how do you think it? What do you think whether this conflict changed this image of a Jew as other, as alien member of Ukrainian society? And in general, what do you think how this military conflict impact Jews in Ukraine? Thank you.
Well, look, if we were now in the first weeks of the conflict, I would probably fully agree with you how important was the influence of this group of volunteers. Now we already, 3 presidents changed in the meantime, went up and down, came as the heroes of the war and left as the heroes of corruption. So Ukraine has a lot of problems. I was there many times, and not only because I'm from Ukraine, but because Jewish agency, of course, had a huge operation. We are taking people from the battlefield, bringing them to Dnipropetrovsk, and I think in general, the attitude of Ukrainians to Jews is very good. No, meaning there is some antisemitism, but in general, they don't feel that Jews in any way are betraying them to the country. On the other hand, I have to say the Russians feel about Jews very good. The chief rabbi of Russia, who is Chabad, supports fully Putin. The chief rabbi of Ukraine, who is also Chabad, supports fully Ukrainian government. So Jews are in a very difficult situation here. I have to say I received Russian ambassador who complained why we are not condemning Ukrainian anti-Semitism, and I received Ukrainian ambassador who complained why we don't condemn Russian anti-Semitism. And I said to both of them that from our point, there is no state anti-Semitism in Russia, and there is no state anti-Semitism in Ukraine. I personally had a lot of criticism of Putin where he took Russian democracy, that's for sure, but not about his policy towards Jews, because it is a positive one. And I have a lot of sympathy to Ukraine and the hardships because of the war with Russia. But let's say, you know what, when there was Ukrainian revolution, Maidan, you know what I'm talking about, yeah? And when they started with the war with Russia, there were some Jews who were already in the process. Jewish agency was already processing their documents. They were going to make Aliyah, and they canceled the Aliyah. Not many, but there were some who said, now is the time for us to fight for Ukraine. I have to say, it was, 5 years ago, 6 years? They all are now in Israel. Because it's much bigger than simply, it's a long historic process of redistribution of power on that part of the world, and I don't think that some Ukrainian Jewish volunteers on that side or that side can really change something. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sharansky. It's a great honor to host you here today. My question is not particularly about anti-Semitism, but about liberal democracies in general. There seems to be a wave of global anxiety regarding the future of liberal democracies. There seems to be a wave, and you're a person who have a long history of fighting totalitarianism. There's a loss of trust in democratic institutions, whether political institutions, journalism. There seems to be some tendencies towards totalitarian voices that are rising around the world. And Putin said, I think a couple of weeks ago, he made his statement that liberalism is obsolete. I want you to comment or hear a comment what do you make of what's going on now globally, and it seems affecting everywhere, this loss of trust, and it's even in the States, in Europe, and even in Israel.
I'm not concerned about the fact that Putin is against liberalism. I'm really concerned that on American campuses, there are more and more people. First of all, they believe that Marxism is the best thing in the world, and I know what an awful thing it is, and Marxism became popular again. That freedom of speech is not something which is like conditional of existence of university. If you will take the list of the speakers who are prohibited from speaking at the university on the demand of the students, that says something a lot about what's happening with the students, what is their attitude of American students at the university to the democracy, to the freedom of speech. That's really what concerns me. Again, going back to Israel simply because I'm dealing with this all the time, on one of the universities, I was speaking together with Michael Douglas and about Jewish identity and all the things, and there was Hillary organized a big meeting, and it was a very interesting audience, but there was a group of students who came to demonstrate against Israel, and I went out to speak to them. And one young woman is keeping the slogan, boycott Israel, it is apartheid. And I chose her of all these people to talk, and I said to her, you know, you are too young to remember apartheid. And I was friend with Nelson Mandela, and I was also an international observer at the first elections. So let me talk to you for 5 minutes about what apartheid is, was in South Africa. And then let you and your friends to explain to me why you think it's legitimate to accuse Israel. And she was a little bit confused what to say. Then she looked at her like ringleader. There was a big guy she was a small girl of my height, so that's why I came to her. I could speak eye to eye, but there was and he gave her some signal, and suddenly she started shouting. She said, "We did not come here to talk to you. We came here to demand boycott Israel." And everybody started saying, boycott Israel, boycott Israel. So, and I looked in her eyes, and it reminded me so much these hysterical shouts at the Soviet meeting in Soviet Union when they were condemning Sakharov or Solzhenitsyn. And people saying, we don't need to read the books of this betrayer, Solzhenitsyn, because the very fact that he is helping to our enemies enough, condemned, and they are shouting hysterical things which they are told to shout without thinking. And suddenly you see that these American students on one of the most progressive universities, without any thinking, they're shouting and shouting without. That's what concerns me much more than Putin. Putin, of course, liberalism is a problem for him, but unfortunately, he is right that he feels that liberalism is becoming weaker. We should be concerned not about what Putin says. We should be concerned about the fact that liberalism is becoming weaker in the bastions of liberalism, in the universities. That's what concerns me.
Yeah.
Lithuanian political history tells about that Nazis and Soviets is ago. What do you think about it?
About what?
Nazis and Soviets is ago or different?
Well, look, Nazis is unique, of Nazism, fascism in Germany is unique phenomena, and communism of Stalin is unique phenomena, and this is evil and this is evil. But when people say that is the same, it doesn't help. It doesn't help you to understand the roots of Nazism if you are trying to analyze them through Marxism. And it doesn't help you to understand all the evil of Stalinism if you analyze it through racism of Hitler. That's why I don't understand why we have to. These are two big evils, no doubt. But that's like in Ukraine, where I was challenged recently. Why you in Israel refuse to recognize Holodomor as another Holocaust? You know what this Holodomor is? Yeah. Okay. And I said, you know what? I think Holodomor is a big crime. And if it is as big as you think, why your museum of Holodomor is so pathetic and so poor? Learn from our Holocaust museums. That's how it has to be, first. But second, how it can help you to understand the evil of Holodomor if it was as you say, if you compare it with the Auschwitz, and how it can help us to analyze the unique evil of Auschwitz if you start looking on it through the prism of NKVD, which was sent to take wheat from Ukrainian villages. That's why I think we should not fight for the recognition of our words as equality of evils. Every evil should be judged by its own. Yeah.
First of all, it's an honor to be here and to listen to you with your wisdom. I think that in terms of what you were discussing about the liberal and the nationalist, relating that to anti-Semitism, the way I conceptualize it, we have, broadly speaking, two types of anti-Semites. We have the Purim anti-Semite, where Haman wants to kill every last Jew, women, children, old people. And then we have the Hanukkah anti-Semite, who's very willing to accept us as Jews as long as we give up our identity as Jews, become Hellenists, then it's all fine. And I think that relates in some ways to what you were saying. But the other thing that I find very troubling in Canada is that I don't think the left today is at all liberal. I think they have lost the liberalism. And with all the things that you said, freedom of speech only goes one way. Silence anything that goes against us, and also the misinformation that we see on the campuses. I'm sure you're familiar with Ian Pachepa and his work from the Securitate, but that never gets spoken about. It is known, there are a couple of books about it that Pachepa wrote after he came to the United States, but this is completely not discussed, and young people today have no idea where these beliefs, the extreme left beliefs that they espouse with a knee-jerk reflex, where it comes from. I wonder if you could elaborate or respond to that.
Okay, but what you just now said, it was also in my answers to the previous questions. It is illiberal atmosphere on the campuses, which is the biggest threat to liberalism today, because it's something which is viewed as the heart of liberalism, universities, and it becomes more and more liberal. You cannot have free discussion. I was witness to this. I was in these discussions many times when they were stopped by force. So it is a liberal atmosphere of the universities which is the biggest threat, and it is absolute arrogance. I mentioned Marxism. Why? Because it's simply arrogance of people who become more sympathetic to the evil ideas which brought to the killing of tens of millions of people. And maybe one of the problems is that Nazi was defeated. There were Nuremberg trials and so on. So you cannot really come with any kind of sympathy to Nazi ideas, because communism, Stalin's communism, was never officially defeated. It was corrected, it was this, and there were never the real trials against it. So people can easily become now followers of these regimes and speak about Trotsky and Stalin and Che Guevara as big heroes of today, not understanding that that's exactly what brought to this philosophy which brought to the killing of tens of millions and depriving of freedom of hundreds of millions. So yeah, it is a big problem, and but that's why we have these seminars like this. People are coming from many campuses in order to go back as the soldiers, as the fighters. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. You spoke, I think, in a very compelling way about the engagement between liberalism and nationalism. And I wonder if you could, I think people tend to think about this just very easily in regard to civic nationalism. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what it looks like, what the engagement between liberalism and nationalism is in a situation of ethnic nationalism. And what that looks like, how the possibility exists, and so on.
I don't. Our Jewish nationalism, is it ethnic nationalism? Or is it civic nationalism? I simply don't. Look, I am not an academician like all of you. I am not a professor, so that's why I speak only from my experience. So how you identify me?
I think people generally regard Israel as being a kind of ethnic nationalism,
Okay.
rather than, for example, the civic nationalism of the United States.
Okay, so Israel as a state has a clear mandate. That was the idea of the founding fathers of Herzl and all the rest. And gathering of exiles, that people who were exiled 2,000 years ago, who succeeded in spite of all this, the only nation probably they ought to succeed for 2,000 years of exile to keep itself as a nation, they have the right and they have the need to have their national home back and have an opportunity, everybody who wants to come back there. So yeah, it is ethnic. I don't see any problem between this idea and having Jewish democratic state. Well, that's what. We are making some mistakes. I was very much for national law, but not in this form because it's even if it only seems that it's undermines the balance. We should not make anything what seems that undermines the balance. But that's a political mistake, which I'm sure will be corrected. You know, we have corrections of our laws all the time. But ideologically, Israel proved there is no problem to have this meeting between ethnic nationalism, as you call it, and the state for all the citizens with all the rights for all the minorities and so on. So I really don't understand the difference in the question. Okay.
We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask the last question, and then we're going to go to the room across the way. So, what do you think is the responsibility of students and professors at this moment in history with regards to the reemergence of antisemitism and the delegitimization of Israel? What's our responsibility at this moment in history?
Well, as for responsibility of students, I don't know they are learning how to be effective in this world, and I think it's not a responsibility, but it's opportunity for them to understand that the ideal world they're dreaming about will be impossible if the evil of anti-Semitism, new and old, will continue prospering. As to the professors, yes, no doubt that professors have a lot of responsibility. I think, and we were speaking about it today in the number of questions, the fact that there are so many, and I saw it, professors who believe that they are continuing the best human traditions of fighting for the human rights and freedom, and are giving hand and support and solidarity to the forces which in the end are working for the most primitive types of hatred and persecution. We see how it is then translated, how these voices for freedom of Palestine are turning into the support of the most primitive dictatorships and terrorist groups in the Middle East. I think, yes, there is a big responsibility of the professors. I also would say we were not speaking about it, but I try always, as the head of Jewish Ends, and we had a lot of activities on my initiative in the campuses, and I tried always to encourage Jewish groups, pro-Israeli Jewish groups, to work together with Arab and Muslim groups in support of civil society in Arab countries. When Badawi, Saudi Arabian student, is arrested for saying what every Arab student on American university believes in, and he's whipped publicly, and there is not a one protest of Arab students in American universities, I think it's big shame for students, but no less for the professors, who don't even think that they have to teach their students about the importance of civil society in Saudi Arabia and Egypt and in any other country. And I spoke to some of these professors. And for them it's like to change all their worldview. Why? It is part of that liberal mandate which they believe they are having. So I hope that at least those who were on our seminar, on your seminar, they will help to build these bridges between those who believe in freedom among Jewish groups and non-Jewish groups. Thank you.
On behalf of everybody here, thank you very much, Natan Sharansky. So now we're going to go to the other seminar room across the way, and there's going to be wine and cheese, and we can continue the conversation with Mr. Sharansky and among ourselves.